We're settling down with our families, and the radio goes off of a mass casualty incident.
If my kid were inside the synagogue and now I'm at my home without any connection to the outside world, and I don't know what with my son.
As far as I'm concerned, there are no more victims on site. And then suddenly, I see 2 patients with broken arms. Hi everyone, I'm Dovie Maisel, Vice President of Operations at United Hatzalah, Israel's largest volunteer emergency medical service.
And I'm Elad Bachar, Medical Director of United Hatzalah.
And how are we doing today, Elad? Better this week a little bit.
Like everybody feeling in Israel. Back to you.
Well, actually, I'm doing good.
Great.
And you know, getting more and more excited to talk about all of these incidents, looking back at them and learning lessons from them. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity to share with our colleagues and just the general public to hear about what these first responders are doing everywhere.
And hopefully someone will think what went wrong, what went right, and
maybe learn something.
Right.
So let's jump into this episode and talk about a very interesting mass casualty incident that occurred in a synagogue here in Israel. And maybe I'll jump right into it and you know, talk a little bit about it. And where it took place, when it took place, which was a very intense period of time that we were undergoing here in Israel. May of 2021, Israel back then had been going through a number of major incidents. And when I talk about Israel, it's us as responders, as paramedics, EMTs on the street. It started off with a crowd crush disaster, which we have a whole dedicated episode. If I'm not mistaken, it's even the next one that we're doing.
The biggest incident.
The biggest civilian disaster in Israeli history that killed 45 people in a Jewish festival event. And we'll make a whole different episode about that. Right after that, there was a major operation and missile attacks on Israel for a period of a week, resulting in many people injured and many missiles that were incoming on an Israeli population.
And also domestic problem.
And internal, we'll talk about that in this episode. There was an internal uprising in mixed cities of major riots. And just a day after all of that ended and the ceasefire went into place, and we just were settling down for a very special holiday, a Jewish holiday called Shavuot. We were settling in. It was a Friday evening. I think it was a Friday or whatever. It was evening hours. We're settling down with our families, and the radio goes off of a mass casualty incident of a disaster in a synagogue that the Bleachers, this is a synagogue that had over 4,000 people in it.
Wow.
And, you know, just preparing for the prayers of this holiday. And the bleachers there collapsed, resulting in the death of 2 people and wounding around 200 people in this incident. And, you know, we're stretched to the limit. Our nerves are racking after 3 weeks of disaster and war and finally expecting, you know, just to settle down a little bit with the family. But as we know, never a dull moment here. And the radio went off of this collapse, and MCI protocol activated.
The synagogue was in a very, very narrow street, in a rural area.
A rural town, actually. It's a rural town called Givat Ze'ev, which is located about 15, 20-minute drive out of Jerusalem, west of Jerusalem. This is an ultra-Orthodox community, very, very ultra-Orthodox community. You can imagine 4,000 people standing on bleachers with the rabbi on the bottom preparing for the services. Everyone's dressed and excited for the holiday. And at one moment, because of structural problems, you know, people improvising, trying to get more room for more people in, not working with the engineers, not complying with requirements. At one moment, it all collapses.
How was the first call? It's interesting to understand what was the first call that we got here.
So actually, the first call that came in was from one of our volunteers, who's Hasidic, and was there. He was actually, he had taken an ambulance to be on standby because this was on this holiday, all the followers of this rabbi come together to pray together on this holiday. So he's one of these followers, and he was there with an ambulance, with one of our ambulances, and he made a call and said the bleachers collapsed. There are a lot of people injured. He did not even have a rough estimate of what was going on. However, dispatch immediately understood that the potential, because everybody knows here this Hasidic group, so everybody knew that there are thousands of people there. So the potential of this incident was of a large-scale mass casualty incident. And once again, where our nerves are stretched to the limit, we're after a period of time here of extreme tension due to the war and the disaster that occurred before. So everyone's on high alert. So once dispatch activates MCI, boom, everybody's on the way. So even if it's distant, even if it's challenging, and we'll talk about the different challenges here and what happened, which was a little bit different than other incidents that we've responded to. Like you say, Elad?
No MCI similar to the other one.
Exactly. Exactly. So obviously, dispatch pulls out MCI protocol, starts working accordingly, dispatches all resources available from Jerusalem and neighboring areas towards the area. And it's then that we understand that the location of the synagogue is at the bottom neighborhood, at the end of a street which is narrow, barely wide enough for an ambulance to go by in one direction.
Anyone say Murphy again?
Oh yeah. He's on our shoulder all the way.
Oh, okay.
And what happens is everyone's being directed to the area. First responders with motorcycles obviously are able to make it in all the way at this point. A lot of the people that were in the synagogue, the Hasidim that were there, they started pulling people out, just pulling them out of the shul, which, by the way, the synagogue itself is a construction site. It's like a massive synagogue that its construction has not been completed yet. So you're looking at a construction site with thousands of people in it, hundreds of them injured, being pulled out, thrown out to the street. And what happened was, in retrospect, if we can say this, is that many of the people who were injured, and I'm talking about fractures, broken arms and legs, I'm not even talking about just post-trauma, I'm talking about actual injuries, were just taken to houses nearby, just so that they're not stuck there. And while resources are on the way and starting to accumulate there on scene and starting to create some sort of sense within the chaos, we're trying to put a picture together. And I think that if we talk about MCIs, mass casualty incidents in general, I think the rule is, in all disasters, is that they'll be chaotic. If that is one thing that we know, chaos will control the scene.
Oh, expect the unexpected stuff.
Well, that's one of the basic rules. Always expect the unexpected. But I think that maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. Let's shift aside 1 second from the grand story of the Givat Ze'ev bleachers collapse. Let's talk about how disasters behave, how mass casualty incidents behave. And that is chaos. And in some places, in other places in the world, the concept of managing an incident is controlling the chaos. And what we've understood here with experience over 30 years in this is that
you cannot control.
You can't control chaos. It's people, it's pressure, it's adrenaline, it's injuries, it's media, it's bystanders. It's so many different components that are controlling the incident. So what do we need to do as first responders, as incident commanders, is to create some sense within the chaos, create that yellow brick road. Create the yellow brick road where there's a lot of noise all around. We know what our mission is. We need to identify each and every one of the victims. We need to pull them out. We need to triage them, tag them, and make sure that they get to the hospital according to their level of severity and get the proper treatment. That's our mission. we don't need to lose focus and try and control chaos. It's never going to happen.
But, okay. And now I'm taking you back to Givat Ze'ev.
Okay.
And we understand that they're starting to pulling people out of the palanches,
The bleachers.
the bleachers, and you pull them out to the...
For those who didn't understand, paranches is the Yiddish word for bleachers.
So civilian pull injured people out. Some of them get to houses surrounding the area, but part of them are now lying at the street with no access to ambulances, access maybe to motorcycles.
Not no access, limited.
Limited access. And now what? Okay, they did the triage. They started to take the critical injuries, but now I think that they should go, I don't know, few minutes with them, with stretchers to the ambulances, and then, I don't know, 20 or 25 minutes of driving to the hospital. So we're talking about injured people that can get to the hospital even 60 minutes after.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about this now. But what happened there was early in the game, the police were able to at least clear that one lane road. So what happened was we created, I personally, by the way, I jumped in the car when the incident immediately happened. It took me about 35 minutes to get there because I came from a greater distance. I was not on shift. And on the way, I'm on the phone with dispatch, with the commanders, with whoever it is, and incident command, which is in an open hotline to the dispatch center. And we were able to understand the location. We were able to create a route, a one-way route where a long line of ambulances just went in. The incident commander designated a subordinates there that would be the triage commander, the transport commander, and they created a staging area where all those victims that were being pulled out of the synagogue, mind you, the responders, because of the crowd, weren't able to even enter this construction site and down 3 levels to the grand hall of the synagogue. So essentially what they did was they created a staging area on the main entrance to the site where triage was performed, and the red tags were immediately pushed out to the first ambulances that weren't blocked in the front of the line and taken to the hospital. The staging area, they were tagging them, obviously stabilizing them, doing whatever was needed. And as the ambulances were able to make it in through this route, they were uploaded to the ambulances and transported out.
Other challenges that were this incident was, first, it's ultra-Orthodox, it's Chag, and
it's a holiday.
It's holiday, you don't use cell phones, and the media is also not so good, so you can't let everybody know that there is a unique incident.
So that's that. Wow, yeah, you're reminding me actually of different aspects of things that we did there. Was imagine now a lot of these Hasidim, these followers, don't even live in Israel. They live in the States, they live in the UK, and they come in specially for this holiday. Imagine their families, now with time differences, here it's already holidays, so they can't use their phones. And abroad, it's still Friday, and their families are watching it on TV about this terrible disaster, and the
and they can't
ripple effect, and they can't. So one of the things that we did, we'll talk about that afterwards a little bit, was looking at the psychotrauma side and response. We understood that this was an important component, and we had communications going outwards towards their families as well. And not only that, but also we had created, we have, as part of the MCI protocol, we have volunteers and responders that deploy to hospitals to be coordinators. Hospital coordinators for communications, for information, cross-checking victims that are taken from the scene, getting to the hospital and whatnot. But let's go back a little bit, back to the staging area, where at this point we're pulling out the critical patients, putting them in ambulances, getting them out. Additional units are on the way and arriving in this long motorcade of ambulances. So on scene, we've got enough responders already. as far as doctors, EMTs, paramedics that are treating the patients in the staging area. There is no point in trying to stretcher them out towards the ambulances because they're all stuck in one long row. So the idea was to expedite the transport process, and ambulance teams that were arriving, nobody gets off the ambulance. The ambulance that arrives, team stays. We early in the game already told them nobody gets off the ambulance. We have enough responders on scene. You stay in the ambulance, we will open the back doors, pull out the stretcher, throw the backboard on, take your backboard in exchange, close the back doors, two hits on the back door, and move out. And the officer that was assigned there in coordination with dispatch center would give you the designated hospital to transport to. And it took a few minutes, but eventually we created a system, and the system started working, and patients were being transported. We're transporting 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 and 50, and enough resources are there. At the same time, obviously, part of MCI protocol is activation of the Airborne 669 unit. I think we spoke about this in previous episodes, and to find a landing zone for them. Because like we said, like Elad, like you said, the distance to the hospitals was very big. So if we can reduce the amount of victims taken on ambulances and put 20 on a helicopter, and from there out to the hospital, that would help in the efforts.
Beside the casualties that's lying near the synagogue, casualties also took to other houses surrounding. So you have an MCI in the synagogue, and you don't know how many injured people are surrounding you in houses.
It was actually amazing. I'm on scene there, and we're looking at the staging area and the ambulance, and the mechanism is working. So at a certain point, I would say about an hour into the incident, we're starting to see already we're seeing it relax a little bit. The amount of victims is reduced. The vast majority, as far as we saw at that point, which was about 100, were already transported to hospitals.
No critical injuries at site.
No critical injuries on site. And now what we're starting to see is, I'm asking one of my medics there. I tell him, okay, go do a scene survey, go downstairs. And mind you, I didn't even mention this at the beginning, talk about Murphy, is once you go down below ground level, there is no communications, not radio, not cellular, because it's way too low. So it's all based on people sending messages from one to another to relay communications up to where there's already radio communications. So I tell them, okay, go screen the site, go screen the grand hall of the synagogue, make sure that no one's left under the bleachers and whatever it is. And they come back and say, okay, we're done. There are no more victims on scene. So as far as I'm concerned, as an incident commander on scene, I'm like, okay, it's the end of the incident, and we'll talk about psychotrauma in a second. But as far as I'm concerned, there are no more victims on site. And then suddenly, I see two patients with broken arms. I'm like,
where did
you
it
guys
come from?
So what happened was, because the chaotic situation at the beginning, they were taken to an apartment of a building nearby. And now that the people saw that the stress levels and the chaos levels were reduced, they decided to bring them out to us. And there was two, and then another one, and another one, and another one. And I'm like, okay, dispatch, don't cancel the additional ambulances. Keep sending them. We're going to see more of this. And essentially, for the next hour and a half, we're looking at victims from bumps and bruises to fractures to whatnot. We're just drizzling down to the staging area, to the triage site. I was like, wow, this I've not seen yet. Not at this level, not at these numbers. And I think it also connects to the culture of these very closed communities. It's first of all, escape. There's a lot of, what's the word for it in English? There's fear of the outer world when you talk about very closed communities. So when something happens, the first thing you do is you run home. And that's what they did.
To a safe place.
To your safe place, exactly. And what happened was, and for the next hour and a half, they were drizzling out. So we were able, in the process of this, and the end numbers doubled. But when we thought the incident was over, we transported another 100 patients. And I'm talking about physical injuries, because when we talk about psychotrauma, that's a whole different game. Imagine you have 200 people injured, 2 killed, one of them a child, and 4,000 people that are part of the incident that made it out alive.
4,000 people that are part of the incident and another thousands surrounding you that maybe their kid was inside or father.
Or imagine these are 4,000 men. This is an ultra-Orthodox
What about the
community. They all have families. So this is 4,000 families. So we will have special episodes talking about psychotrauma, but years ago we understood that the need is not only for physical treatment, paramedics, doctors, and EMTs, but there are those who we call them the silent victims, those who witness or are part of an attack, a terror attack, a disaster, or whatever it is, that are exposed to extreme situations. And typically, and I think we spoke about this in the first episode, was that they would simply be taken to the hospitals. If they were identified, they would be taken to the hospital to even deepen their trauma even more. Where there, they'd see a social worker or a psychologist or something. And over the years, we've developed a psychotrauma unit, a very unique unit, which has hundreds of responders, professional mental health professionals that are able to provide immediate intervention on scene and prevent the need to go to the hospital and know how to relay it over afterwards to community, social services, or whatnot. So here in Givat Ze'ev was one of the incidents that was implemented on scale. And what we did was we actually, this event where they all gathered together, this community, they built major tents on the street for dining, for whatever it is, their kitchens, their dining, their everything. And they cleared out one of the tents and we created like a triage site isolated from the area of the physical incident, and our mental health professionals of the psychotrauma unit deployed to there and started treating hundreds of people there.
Wow. It's so much development from the Versailles 20 years ago till now with the psychotrauma and everything.
I think that there's general awareness to mental wellness in general for the whole world, not only for responders. And here I think was an incident, and we'll talk about this in the episode of Meron as well, but for not as much for our responders, because this is really typical injuries. Okay, this is what people, paramedics and doctors and EMTs see every single day on the street: fractures, injuries, trauma, whatever. But on scale, as far as a psychotrauma mass casualty incident, this was really a game changer. The ability to bring and provide this service was really, really unique.
But I want to take you back to the holiday without cell phones, without media. I don't know, I'm a father. I think if my kid were inside the synagogue and now I'm at my home without any connection to the outside world, and I don't know what with my son. So the psychotrauma, on the one hand, we're treating the people that were actually there on site, but we took some of those representatives and their professionals and created sort of like a mini emergency operations center that was focused on communicating between people who were injured and are in hospitals, people in the community there that were in the disaster, in the synagogue itself, and their families. And we created 10 volunteers there with cell phones. They were literally communicating. They were giving them phone numbers and communicating to reduce the stress levels of these communities here in Israel and, of course, around the world, of these families back home. Sounds very complicated.
It was a very interesting incident to see managed on so many levels, from the challenges on the mass casualty incident, the classic, what we call the injuries, the triage, with the challenges of the transport, through the psychotrauma, and then communicating for the community. I think it was really a very interesting and challenging incident. Also, like I said, in very interesting times that we were dealing with back then as well.
We talked about it at our last episode, but we experienced it. We did drill for this moment, and our volunteers were more prepared because of the drilling that we did.
Not only the exercises and drills, but the fact that we underwent the largest disaster in Israeli history just 3 weeks before that, and a week and a half of war situation really put to the test what we've been training them for years. And we'll talk about this in future episodes as well. So yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think that the ability to train and implement, debrief, and lessons learned, and implement the lessons learned are the real game changer.
Interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, never a dull moment here, as we say. Never a dull moment. I think that really wraps up this episode of Masters of Emergency. You know, looking at another very unique emergency and mass casualty incident, and once again appreciating what people are able to do, how our first responders from all fields are really devoted, and not only do they devote themselves, but they actually, it's a learning process. They continue to implement, they continue to take these lessons learned, and we always say, what do we learn? What's our takeaway from this episode? I think our two major takeaways from this episode will be, first of all, not only training, but taking lessons learned and implementing them. Because if we learn lessons but don't do anything with it, we're not going to do anything. And second is, if we identify a great need on the scene, is not to be stuck in only the core of what we do, but look a little bit aside. And if we can assist and solve a major situation that's developing as a result of this incident, and we're able to think out of the box of how to solve it, just do it. Just do it. And I think those are the two major takeaways from this episode. So if you enjoyed this episode and appreciated it, first of all, subscribe. Make sure to subscribe. Very important. Share with your friends, family. See the amazing work the first responders are doing here in Israel. And until then, stay safe. And remember, training, implementing, lessons learned, and trying to strive for perfection, that's what saves lives. So thanks a lot, guys.